Welcome to episode 9 of the WWIM podcast, WWIM podcast. That's Women Who Inspire Me. Our guest today is the lovely, legendary, smart, funny, super chef, super seamstress, mother of 5, grandmother of 5, the just awesome MaryBeth McGrath, my mother. MaryBeth McGrath. Now, I'm Dave McGrath. She's MaryBeth McGrath. Mom, thank you so much for being our guest today.
My pleasure, Dave.
So, you grew up in the 50s and 60s in Massachusetts.
Yes.
What was that like? Tell us, especially about, I want to hear stories about my awesome grandmother and your mom who shaped who you the woman who you became. What was that like?
Well, I would think that my sister would agree that we had a pretty idyllic childhood. I was born in Worcester and lived in Worcester for the first almost 8 years of my life. First in a 3-decker, then we upgraded to a 2-decker, and then our parents bought land in Paxton and built a house there. So from the mid-50s until they sold that house in 1962, that's where we grew up in Paxton. And we, from the time we came home from school to bedtime, practically, we were outside. 2 of my friends had horses.
Oh, wow.
So I was very involved in that. One of our big treats was to walk uptown to Paxton Center, which had the Paxton Spa and Sullivan's Market. And we could go, it was probably a little over a mile to walk uptown. And we loved Paxton.
Yeah.
We had great friends. And Graham, we had a huge vegetable garden. She and her sister, my Aunt Jean, who was like a second mother, would get together every fall and at each other's houses, and they would can tomatoes. They would make tomato juice. They would can peaches. So we always had really good fresh food from the garden. There was a time when we lived in Paxton that my dad didn't have a job, and Graham, to take up the slack, took 2 housekeeping jobs. She went to help a neighbor who had a big house and needed some help. Yeah. She worked 2 8-hour days for $8.
Oh, my God.
Per day.
Makes me feel better about my parapay.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, then, $8 was pretty good.
Yeah.
She didn't have her license until she got her license when she was 65. And my dad attempted to teach her how to drive. And one time my sister and I were in the back seat of our 54 Chevy with our dog, Laddie. And Graham was going for a driving lesson. So Grandpa was in the front seat. And he said, "Okay, gently apply the brakes." Well, the dog, my sister, and I went flying off the back seat, and Graham said, "That's it. I'm not cut out to drive." But she was a very nervous driver.
But cut out to do nothing else stopped her. She would do everything. She was mowing the lawn when she was how old? Like
in her 80s. Yeah. And she wasn't afraid of, as I was, of bats or mice or anything like that. She did not have an easy childhood. Right. She was only 8 years old when her mother died. So the fact that she was such a great mother,
right,
and a great cook and all of the above, I attribute to my Aunt Lucy, who was her older sister by 13 years.
Wow, so basically...
she basically helped raise them. And when Graham came to the United States, she came, as you know, from the little island of Saint Pierre Miquelon, and she couldn't speak any English. Right. They all spoke French. They went to French school, and that school had a church. Of course, back then the Mass was in Latin, but everything else, the sermons and things were in French. So was not easy for her.
Yeah.
And they were poor. She told me stories of when they were kids. They used to go on the railroad tracks with a bucket and pick up pieces of coal that had fallen onto the tracks so they could have heat in their house. So
and instilled in you, I think, be happy for what you have.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, and that you passed that down to me.
She used to say, "I'm so lucky."
Yeah.
And looking back on her life, you would think, what did she have to be saying that?
Right.
But that's the way she was.
Yeah.
I mean, she was very happy with nothing.
Right.
And made something out of nothing all the time.
And did what she had to do to get by, no matter what the circumstances threw at her.
She didn't even have a birthday cake until she was 21 years old and working in a factory. And the girls in the factory, and I didn't know that until I was an adult.
And and that says something about her, because there's so many people that would be like, "Hey, I didn't have a birthday cake till I was 21. What are you complaining about?"
No. It's true, but she never did that. And she was strict.
Yeah.
I always thought she was a little bit stricter with me than she was with my sister, because, and I think that happens naturally anyway, because I know with your first one, you're kind of, you don't want to make any mistakes and you don't want them to make any mistakes. But, so I think in part, she molded that into me also. But we really did have a good childhood. We had everything we needed.
Right. And you had each other.
Right.
And that's what,
Yep.
They kind of taught, Graham taught you that all the other stuff, all those other details don't really matter. If you're with your family and you're, taking care of each other, that's
right.
Really...
And we were lucky enough to have an extended family because my Aunt Jean, Graham's sister, and Uncle Fred and their two boys, our cousins Jim and Tom, also lived in Paxton. And we did everything together. And it's because of Uncle Fred that we started going to PEI, which, of course, has
life-changing.
It really was life-changing for the whole family, for everyone in the whole family.
And that's trickled down as well.
Yes, it has, even to the grandchildren now, because they love it too. So, because of that, we had a great social life. I mean, every Sunday, we alternated going to each other's houses after. You had to go to 7:30 mass,
of course.
And if we weren't going to each other's houses for breakfast, we were going out for breakfast. But we very seldom went out to eat. I mean, not the way people do now. And takeout was, no one did takeout.
And Graham was proud of her cooking.
Oh, very, very much so.
And well deserved.
Very much
to be
so.
proud, because it was.
Oh yeah. I can still picture the house in Paxton and the setup of it, the layout of it, and everything. It was their dream home. Yeah. And I can still remember. Oh my goodness, she was so mad at Grandpa because the living room had a huge fireplace wall with white cabinets and bookcases above, and Grandpa decided it would be a good idea to burn the Christmas tree along with some wrapping paper after Christmas, and there was such a conflagration of big puff of smoke, and the smoke went all over the white paint of the Graham was that's one big difference between Graham and I. She was a real cleaner. She was never happier than when she was cleaning. She hummed all the time.
Probably because she was happy to have the actual space to clean.
That's
right?
exactly why. I mean, after years of living in tenements, to have her own kitchen floor that she picked out, and she loved to clean. So the fact that there was smoky ashes all over her white cabinets, that's probably the maddest I've ever seen her. And of course, Gramp kind of thought it was funny. But
do you often drive by that house? I know I've driven by that house. I've never been in it.
Whenever I'm in Paxton, I do drive by. It's changed a lot because just the we
layout
had
of the land and
a driveway with a garage that went under the house.
Okay.
And Grandpa and Uncle Fred built a beautiful stone wall that was probably 8 feet high, and that's gone.
Yeah.
So, it has changed a lot. And when Auntie and I often talk about this, the front lawn seemed huge when we had to mow it. And now I said, it can't be, it couldn't have been that close to the street, so maybe they widened the road. But, so I would come home from school, I'd get changed because you had to keep your school clothes
separate
looking good. And then I'd go across the street, which is where the barn was, where my friends'
the
horses were. And I would get started, cleaning out the stalls. Grandma, she didn't encourage me to go over there because, of course, when I came back, dirty. I smelled like horses and manure and all of that stuff. But it was great, and every once in a while, after doing all that stuff, they would actually let me ride one of the horses. So it was my friend Sue. She started out, she had a little Welsh pony. I mean, the things you remember, a little Welsh pony. Well,
speaking of things you remember, so not only you were playing with those horses was an after-school activity, you mentioned the Girl Scouts before. What?
Yes.
How did that come about? And you said you ended up on the radio.
Oh, yeah. We met at the Paxton Town Hall, which was also where we had our ballroom dancing lessons. And our leader, I don't know if she knew the person that was did the radio show, but she got this idea that it would be nice to have these little girls go into a jewelry store and look at all the jewels and gems. So we were on the Julie and Andy show. And
TAG, you said? WTAG.
Yeah, WTAG.
Yeah. If you can find this footage, WTAG.
Yeah, I wonder. It's probably in the archive somewhere. And we were just, they were showing us all this fancy jewelry, and we were oohing and eyeing and talking about our birthstones and things like that. But that was my introduction to radio. And in those days, I mean, we did have a TV, but when I was little, the radio was on all the time. Up in the 2-decker. I don't really remember living in the 3-decker because we moved when I was like 3.
Right.
But I can remember that radio being on all the time while Graham was ironing, and she ironed everything. And I learned, she ironed sheets and pillowcases. I learned to ironing Grandpa's boxer shorts. Then when I mastered that, I graduated to his hankies, and those had to be done a certain way. I mean, I don't think people today iron.
Mark, do you iron your boxer shorts?
I still iron occasionally, but it was a thing then. I mean, because everything was hung outside. No one had a dryer, and the 2-decker and the 3-decker, you had a back porch with a huge clothesline that you pulled in onto the porch, and then you hung everything out. And I can still remember Grandpa's pants coming in off the line, and they were frozen solid. Oh, she would stand them up and in front of the stove so they would dry.
That's crazy.
And then in the summertime when it was hot, the things would come in and they'd be really dry. And she had a special little bottle with a sprinkle head on it, and she'd sprinkle all the clothes and roll them up and put them in the refrigerator. And then she'd wait a little while, and then they'd be easier to iron. But everything was ironed.
Now, did Graham pass along her sewing skills to you? Was that self-taught?
She did not sew. I learned how to sew. We had a home ec class in 7th and 8th grade at Paxton Center School. And that's where I learned how to sew. And I did some of it, but I didn't sew for a long time, probably until, before we were married, I made my wedding veil. But I really didn't start to sew until
you had kids.
I had kids. And more specifically until I had Carolyn, because I didn't. really have a good sewing machine. I got my best sewing machine before Tommy was born in 76, and it's still working. It's up at the cottage in PEI.
So you grew up in Paxton. When did you move out of that house? Did you move? You didn't go to Westboro State Hospital. You didn't. Did you live in that house?
Okay. Yes.
So that was that after Paxton?
That's where after Paxton. Okay. Grandpa got a job as the assistant business manager at the state hospital, and he had to move to the grounds of the hospital. There was no discussion about it. Auntie and I often talk about this, how
they just said we're doing this.
We're selling the house, we're moving. And we were devastated. I was a freshman in high school, and I went to
that's a transition time anyway.
Except that I was going to high school in Worcester, so my high school didn't change. Auntie did have to change schools, but it was traumatic for Auntie and I to leave that house, and they tried to spin it positive. You'll each have your own room, things like that. But it was difficult. It really was. And Auntie and I both still consider that we grew up in Paxton. Even though the majority of our life wasn't there, but that's where we feel we lived the most.
And then you worked. Did you end up working at the hospital
I worked at the state hospital. I started working there when I was between freshman and sophomore year in college, and I loved it. I wanted to quit school at Anna Maria and go to nursing school because I loved what I did. I was a nurse's aide, and Graham and Grandpa and I had a meeting with the head of the English department at Anna Maria. And basically, they told me I couldn't leave.
Jesus. See, that's such a sign of the times.
Oh, right? It's definitely a sign of the times because we did what our parents said, And so I stayed at Anna Maria, which it's funny how you see the pattern of your life. Because if I hadn't been at Anna Maria, I wouldn't have met Dad.
Right. So everything happens for a reason.
Right. So do you want me to talk about meeting Dad?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So you stayed at Anna Maria.
I stayed at Anna Maria. I had a great bunch of friends, and some of them had gone to high school together, not with me, but to another high school. And they, when they were in high school, had a little community service that they did, which was going to a nursing home every Friday night and
what are you doing Friday night?
Yeah, I know. Singing. It was a nursing home that was just for old women.
Yeah.
It was called Providence House, run by the Sisters of Providence, right near St. Vincent's.
Right near Kelly Square, right?
Up the hill from Kelly Square.
Up the hill from Kelly Square, Mark.
Yeah.
He does Kelly Square jokes. Anyway.
Oh, okay. I know Kelly Square.
So you're going to one of these nights?
Yep. So we were going to one of these nights.
I wish I had a video of this. See you walking in and seeing him. Okay, go ahead.
We needed a piano player. And one of our friends knew Dad. And she asked him if he would be willing to play the piano. And he said yes. So we, that's how we met. Yeah. And then he went to Holy Cross, as you know, and we...
was he? So he was at... You were both in college at this point.
Yeah.
He's only a year ahead of you.
He was a year ahead of me at Holy Cross. And one night after... we had entertained the ladies. The nuns used to trundle out a little cart with little glasses of punch and cookies for us afterwards. And, we sang like all the old World War II songs. These poor women.
Yankee Doodle Dandy?
Oh, we did we did a lot of, like I'll Be Seeing You and Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree and, all those songs. And, they couldn't remember where they were the day before.
Yeah, right.
But they could remember the words to every one of those songs.
In their brain somewhere, not getting out.
Exactly. So there was what we used to call then a mixer at Holy Cross, which was basically a dance in the field house with a DJ. So we decided the girls and I
45s.
Oh, right? Probably, yeah. I had my car, my Ford Falcon, 62 Ford Falcon named Esmeralda. And
I never knew that.
We decided that we would go up to Holy Cross to the mixer. And when we got there, Dad was there.
Oh, so that was just a coincidence. It was almost like a coincidence. Well, kind of. I guess.
Yeah,
you didn't know he was gonna.
No, but there were guys from Holy Cross who also came to the nursing home.
So yeah.
And Dad was there, and we, he asked me to dance, and I did, and that was just before Christmas. So we had like a Christmas dance at Anna Maria, and our friend who had recruited Dad to play the piano had asked him to go to this Christmas dance, and I was going with someone else. So
the old switcheroo.
Somewhere I have a picture of me sitting between Dad and my date, and Dad was leaning over, talking to him, leaning over across me. And so, that's really how we kind of got to know each other at that dance. Right. And then he called. At the time, it was a long-distance call from Worcester to Westboro.
That's crazy.
He called me and asked me if I would like to go. Oh, at that dance, I had told him that I wanted to go see Peter, Paul, and Mary.
So you probably gave him your number. He got someone gave.
Well, no,
he got your number
it up
somehow.
In the phone book,
oh, right.
Yeah, and and so I had told him I wanted to go see Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I was probably going to be going by myself. So
wink, wink.
In my mind, I wasn't saying it intentionally. So anyway, he called and asked me if I'd like to go see Peter, Paul, and Mary with him. And I kind of put him off because I wanted to talk to my friend and make sure.
Right, that there wasn't going to be drama.
There wasn't going to be. And she said, "Oh, no, we're just friends." Yeah. So I can't remember.
What was her name? You don't know.
Mary Ann Laporte.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
She has.
I may not be existing right now.
I know. Yeah, that's right. Thanks for letting him.
You don't think she's with us anymore?
No, she. I know she isn't. Okay. And
from beyond. Thank you.
Yep. She said go for it. So I think I got in touch with Dad and told him, that it was okay. And
so your first date was a concert?
Well, our first real date was to a Bruins game.
Oh. Okay.
My first Bruins game.
Explaining so much. And
when I was 19.
The enigma of Dave McGrath is unfurled, how I became who I am.
Yeah. And so I was 19.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about hockey. I watched one game to prepare myself on Channel 38 with the aluminum foil around the antenna. It was black and white, very fuzzy. And my friends and I, when we were in high school, used to go to the St. John's basketball games. So I said, oh, well, it's not that different from basketball. They go from one end to the other. They shoot. There's guards. There's forwards. Yeah. So we went to the game, and I said to him, I don't know anything about hockey. And he said, well, they got a new kid. He's supposed to be pretty good. Just watch him, number 4. So that was the beginning of my crush on Bobby Orr. Dad used to like to take pictures, and he was down by the glass.
Used to.
Yeah, well, yes. And he was down... Well, it wasn't glass then. He was down by the edge of the rink taking pictures, and he saw that Bobby was signing autographs because before the glass
they would just go up there.
They would just go. Yeah. So he turned around to get my attention, and I was already down there getting Bobby's autograph.
But at your first game?
No, not at the first one. Yeah, subsequently. Yeah. So there we go. There's hockey.
So your first game, were you was that the first time you'd been to any hockey game?
Oh yes.
But so you watched one game and then went to a game. Were you just like wow,
committed?
Yeah.
And
just saw Bobby just doing his thing and unbelievable.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean the Bruins were not that good.
No, he turned it around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you kind of got to see them rise, and then
I did.
So fast forward to your first Mother's Day.
My first Mother's Day, May 10th, 1970. John was born May 4th.
Yeah.
And so he was less than a week old. And the Bruins were playing in the Stanley Cup final, which it's crazy to think that the final game is May 10th when you see how long the season is now. But anyway, and the game went into overtime. And I said to Dad, now, if they score in overtime, the baby is asleep.
So you're on Mayberry Drive
in our apartment.
Yeah.
The baby is asleep. So if they score in overtime, we have to keep the celebration very low key. But luckily, he woke up in time for the Bruins score. And, we went crazy. The people who lived downstairs, the guy was in the National Guard, and he was just coming home. And we could hear his horn blasting from the time he turned onto Mayberry Drive until he got into the driveway. It was just insane. I mean, it had been a long time.
Yeah.
And they should have won the next year, but they didn't. So.
And little did you probably know that John would be the first of 5.
Yeah, I know. When I was a kid, I used to say I was going to marry a farmer from PEI and have 6 boys. So I married an accountant from Worcester. I had 3 boys, so
But he loves PEI.
Oh, he does. Lucky for him. And so I little did I know that John would be the first of 5. We had started looking at houses before he was born because I really didn't want to have him in an apartment. Yeah. I don't know. I just had this.
And
so we really hadn't seen anything that we liked, and we looked at a lot. And our real estate agent called us and said, "There's a house that's going to be available, but the original owners are living in it now. The owners are living in it now, but they have sold it to a developer. So." They said you can come and look at the house, but it's not really them that's selling the house. And Johnny was, maybe a couple of months old. So we went and looked at the house on Bowman Street, and I really liked it. We had never been in this part of Westboro. In fact, at the Fork, there were some kids on bikes, and we said, which way do you go for Bowman Street? And they told us which way to go. And, of course, there were between the Fork and the house that we live in now, there were 2 houses.
Yeah.
3, including the one right across the street from us. There was the Baptiste's old house, which is the old colonial house, and the Belanger's house, and then which was the Newton's house was across the street from us. And there was nothing on our side of the street except for our house until you got down to the turnpike, and then the Walkers.
Wow. So that number's, what is that number up to now? Like there's tons of houses. And now they've even, like, in the backyard, the old backyards of
Well, we were lucky because the developer had bought all the land and had planned on putting a right-of-way in between our house and the next house that he built, and building houses behind there, but because it was so close to the reservoir, the town
conservation
didn't let him do that.
area,
In the conservation area, the town didn't let him do that. So that's why we have the land behind us.
So you moved. So when did you guys? So you moved into that house in 70.
September of 70.
70. Okay.
Yep. And then Carolyn was born in September of 71.
My older sister.
Yeah.
Who's been a previous guest.
So that's right. So. Eventually, when we bought the house, it had 3 bedrooms, which was more than we needed. And then when I was expecting Meg, we decided who was number 5.
3 boys in one room, like the size of this room, was it?
Yes, well,
smaller, maybe smaller than this, or maybe around this size.
You had the bunk beds,
bunk beds, another bed,
one bed, and
there wasn't much else in that room, was there?
No, there wasn't. There was a bureau.
Yeah, there.
And
probably
maybe a toy
no clothes
box
in it.
Yeah, no, the clothes were all on the floor. And so that's when, and John was very excited when we built the addition because he was going to get his own room.
Yes.
But
then got scared,
then
right?
He did, yes. His friends came up to help him move. And as he was walking through the kitchen to go up the other set of stairs, he was crying. But he did adjust. And then eventually
well, then because we went over too, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why that transition, maybe just he...
Well, Tommy was still pretty small. Because Tommy was only 3 when Meg was born, So
I shared a room till John went away to college. That was my freshman year in high school. So that was similar for you too, right? You shared a room with Auntie until
we moved to Westboro.
And that's the thing is like, I never thought, sharing a room. I thought sharing a room was a good thing. Like I never thought, oh God, I don't have my own room. I do know when I got to that age though, I did.
You did want,
but the growing up part, I never thought, oh wow, I got to share a room. I loved having
and
Tommy.
And even when we moved to Westboro, you had to go through my room to get into Auntie's room.
Oh jeez.
So it wasn't, we were
private.
separate, but still together in some ways. So I mean, now people not only have to have their own rooms, they have to have their own bathrooms. And we had 7 people
and one
bathroom, and
crazy.
For a long time, no shower.
That's great.
Dad in the morning would be sitting in the bathtub,
oh my God,
shaving, and I'd be changing a baby. Someone would wander in.
How did you have 5 kids in 10 years? How did you possibly? I say that to people now. They're like, "What?" But I mean, that's a sign of the times as well, too.
Oh
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
So like the Cadigans, there were other big families in town.
Yeah, there were.
Really see.
No. I mean, and now kids have to have their own bathroom, and I watch a lot of the HGTV shows and where people are looking at houses, and they say only one sink in the bathroom. But poor Dad sitting in the tub. I'd be changing a baby. Some kid would wander in, and he'd say, "Anybody else out there want to come in?" As far as how I had 5 kids in it was like 9.5 years, right. I couldn't have done it. Well, talk about it takes a village. I had so much help and support.
Yeah. And we had a great neighborhood.
We had a great neighborhood, fantastic neighbors. I mean, the Moores were as close as family. And
talk about another great mom.
Oh yeah. God. She was my role model. She really was. She had 5 kids, and her youngest was the same age as Johnny. So and
Meg called her Mama Moore.
Yes, Mama Moore. And Meg wasn't the only one to call her Mama Moore. A lot of people, a lot of kids did. And she would take 2 or 3 of you to a little league game just so I'd only have 1 or 2 at home. That was like a vacation. I mean, they were great. If I didn't have a car, she would let me use her car. And then
neighbors looked out for each other.
They did.
I mean, I remember going to the O'Connors just to get like a cup of sugar. I don't know how many times.
All the time.
It would, but it's back and forth. Scott would come over to our house.
Oh, absolutely. She was the first person I knew who had a microwave. And
we were always going over there.
And Carolyn, when she was diagnosed, sometimes there was nothing she wanted to eat, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 11. And I'd say, well, how about a baked potato? And at the time, diabetes was managed very strictly as far as timing goes. If you did your insulin, you had to eat within a certain length of time.
It was harder to control.
She would say, okay. And I would call Serena and I'd say, can I send somebody over with a potato for the microwave? And she was, oh, sure. And whoever would run across the street with a potato and come back with it all wrapped up nice and hot so Carolyn could have something to eat. But, we had a great neighborhood. Not all stay-at-home moms.
No.
That's one thing. I was very, very lucky that I could stay home. I considered myself lucky because now I see, like Meg, especially, she stays home and works.
Right.
But I don't know how people do it. Because
they don't have 5.
No, that's true.
That's part of it.
But I had days that I struggled, and I was at home.
Right.
But I always tried to take a little time, like having everyone in for a nap.
Yeah.
Everyone who was at home, not in school, it was golden.
Yeah.
So instead of doing something that I should have been doing, I would make a cup of tea and sit down and read a book because I just needed some sort of little escape.
Yeah, we knew we were being really bad when you'd get in the car and just go for a drive.
Oh yeah,
we'd be like, oh my god, now we know we got to be really good.
Yeah,
I got to be good. It was such a smart move.
I was never
just to
exit
for
the
very situation.
Long.
No, you weren't because you knew it worked too.
Right? Yes, but I had to separate myself, and then there was the memorable time when I was painting the trim in the living room, a lovely colonial blue. And the phone rang, and I went to answer the phone, and I came back into the living room, and you had decided to help me paint. And there was paint everywhere on the hardwood floor, all over the door. And that time I called Dad, and I said, you have to come home, because if you don't, I might kill Dave.
That's reminding me of, so I just shared this with the kindergartners I work with last week. The time I was riding my bike and not really paying attention. Mm-hmm. So I'll share my side of the story, and then you can say, So I was riding my bike. I was really young. I learned how to ride really young. I was like 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
Riding my bike around the street, not paying attention, and a police officer drives by and sees me just da-da-da-da-da.
No helmets in those days.
Nothing.
No.
Son, you got to be more careful when you ride in the street. Just, giving me the business. Not yelling really, but just being very stern. Mm-hmm. Looking out for me. But of course, you're that age. A police officer's upset with you. You're like, oh my God, am I going to get in trouble? I go. I don't. Have you heard this story, Mark? So I go and cry. I run inside crying to Mom. And of course, being the caring, empathetic problem solver that she is, like, oh, Dave, what's wrong? And I said that a bee stung me, because that's the first thing in my mind that could cause me crying and running inside and not getting in trouble. Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
There was a knock on the door, and there was a policeman at the door. And he very nicely said, I just spoke to your little boy about riding his bike in the street. I hope I didn't scare him. I didn't mean to. And I said, oh, no, I don't think you scared him. He told me he got stung by a bee.
That was my last time I had an entanglement with law enforcement the rest of my life. Not true. But
no.
We won't talk about those stories.
Probably the first time I ever heard of it. And maybe the last time.
Well, what point, you had 5 kids. At what point did you know that I was the number one troublemaker? Was it early on? Was it 4 or 5?
You were, when you were born, you were a pleasure, because Carolyn and Johnny were so close in age. Yeah. They were 16 months apart. Yeah. Then when you came along, Carolyn was 2.5, and Johnny was almost 4. So, they helped me and things. And so you were a pleasure as a baby. You really were. You were great. You were late walking, so you weren't really getting into things. So it was probably more when you were like 2.5 or 3 that your true self.
I gave you a few good years.
Yeah, you did. And I'm looking forward to a few more. But we had to use negative psychology on you. Like if we didn't want you to do something, we would tell you to do it. Yeah. So, or if we wanted you to do something, we would tell you not to do it. And sometimes that worked. But by the time Tommy came around, no, with Meg. So you were in kindergarten.
Yeah.
We were building the addition on the house, and you just didn't listen. You just didn't listen. And we were waiting at the bus stop because you were in afternoon kindergarten, and we had the foundation was poured for the addition. That was it. And they had those big bars, those iron bars that And Mrs. Moore was waiting for the bus with us, just came up for a chat. And I started running towards the addition cellar hole. And I said, Dave, don't go over there. And, of course, you didn't pay any attention. Dave was going to do what Dave wanted to do.
I do this sometimes in my life, no matter what the consequences.
And Mrs. Moore said, "Don't run after him," because I was like 8 months pregnant. So I was lumbering along, trying to get over to you, and you were walking on the edge of the cellar hole.
It was like a pit. I mean, it was a pit going down
a cement
into the
pit.
yeah.
And naturally, you fell and scraped your leg on one of those
bars
sticking out. Yes. So I don't know if that taught you a lesson.
We call that natural consequences.
Yes, I guess that's what we call it. But I did not say what Graham used to say to me, which was, "See, God punished you." That is something I never said to you guys because I just didn't.
And you were always, and this is the thing with your mom, is no matter what trouble we got into, you just wanted to help us. You just knew that it was a kind of like a symptom of something troubling us and wanted to help. Mm-hmm. And that's from me falling into a pit to me being a drunken idiot to no matter what it was. And I don't know how you do that, but you do.
Sometimes I didn't know how I did it. After you were diagnosed with the brain tumor and came through on the other side fine, I didn't know how I did it. I do know that when you don't have a choice, you carry on.
Right. I mean, well, that's the thing. And, you talked about Kara getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that's something that, disease taught us, is that you just go through it and you have to, there are times to complain and be sad about it. But in the end, you still got to keep laughing. You still got to you still got to live life.
Right.
And talk about that. You had your oldest daughter diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. That was 1983.
That was
early 80.
6 weeks before Grandpa died.
So, wow.
Yeah.
So early 83. Mm-hmm. Your oldest daughter gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and then 6 weeks later, your father dies. Mm-hmm. Then 5 years after that, your middle son, troublemaker, gets diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Not only that, walk me through that story. So Kara gets, well, actually, before we jump to that, so Kara gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Mm-hmm. What was that? Like, was that a shock? Was that oh my God?
It was a shock.
Yeah.
There was no history that we knew of.
Right.
And our neighbor down the street, her son had just been diagnosed. His sister was Carolyn's best friend. And he had gotten a state-of-the-art, at the time, test kit. So
blood test, sugar test, glucose test.
So Carolyn I had taken her to the doctor because she had the flu, and she just didn't seem to be getting better. And they didn't check her for diabetes. Carolyn at the time was starting to run, and to try to get fit. She was in, what would that have been, 6th grade, I guess. And she was losing weight. But she went down to visit or to play at her friend Katie's house, and they were all sitting around checking each other's blood sugar.
Just for the hell of it.
Yeah. What else do you do?
Well, there's no internet back then. We got to do something.
Yep. And so Katie's mother, my friend Kathy, called me and said, I don't want to alarm you, but Carolyn's blood sugar is really high.
400 or something? Do you remember the number?
It was really high. It was really high.
Yeah.
It was well over 400.
Something that you had to go to the hospital.
So I called the doctor, and I can't remember now. I think we did go to the doctor and they checked it and they said you have to bring her to the hospital. And when we got there, the hospital knew what she had tested at.
So
they said,
were prepared for
I
it
can't
anyway.
believe you're walking in.
Wow.
So yeah, that was really
and
a
diagnosed
shock.
that day you went, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt about
Interrupting. I remember, of course, selfish 9-year-old Dave was upset because we had plans to go to Cooperstown.
That's
Baseball Hall of
right.
Fame,
Yeah, it was just before April vacation.
Forget about those plans. And when you're in the third grade, you don't think, oh my God, my sister has a chronic disease.
Right,
you think I'm missing out.
Yes,
but as you grow up, you learn. Well, it's important. The only thing that's really important is her being still with us and getting on with her life. Which
exactly.
You mentioned, or I mentioned my Crohn's diagnosis. Seeing. Thank God, for me anyway, seeing Kat deal with chronic disease for those years, I was like, wow, she has type 1 diabetes, but can still getting on with her life, still doing what she still doing things that make her happy.
Yep.
So what was that? So I guess in a way, my Crohn's diagnosis was probably not as much of a shock. You already had one kid with a chronic disease, but this was around Christmas time, so it was a little different.
And actually, Tommy also had
asthma. Yeah. Couple ER trips for that chronic disease.
Yeah. And the asthma sometimes would make him not be able to eat, so he'd get dehydrated, and we'd have to go for IVs and things like that. But
and then John, I know we're jumping back and forth there, but then John didn't have any diagnosable disease, but it got into his own. Falling out of the tree, getting mauled by a dog on his paper route.
Going over the handlebars.
At some point, did you say what else is there?
I couldn't ask myself that.
Yeah, you couldn't because you didn't want to know the answer.
I did not want to know. But there again, I mean, if it weren't for family support,
or I was going to say my Crohn's,
support,
our neighbors with my Crohn's diagnosis. Yeah. So can you walk me through that, though? That kind of 2-week period.
Okay. Well, you weren't feeling well.
Yeah.
Not saying much about it.
Just my stomach hurt.
Yeah, your stomach hurt. We went to pick Johnny up at Providence College, and on our way home, we got off 146 to go to McDonald's, and you didn't want anything. I said, something's wrong.
Graham actually knew beforehand, because that Thanksgiving I didn't have all her mashed potatoes.
Right,
that's She's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, you didn't eat as much. And she always had an eye to how much people were eating.
Then when Graham's cooking and then McDonald's, if I'm refusing those, something's up.
So anyway, I took you to the doctor, and he thought that maybe you were just constipated.
Yeah.
So,
regular pediatrician.
Yeah, the regular pediatrician. So I think he must have recommended a laxative, which is probably
something oil, like some sort of mineral oil or something like that.
Yeah. Which is now we know was not a good thing.
But that was my own fault for not telling him all my symptoms too.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So we came back home, and you had a fever. So luckily, our neighbor, Dr. Bob Thomas, was home. And I called, and I said, I think Dave has a temp, but our thermometer has Celsius. It's not Fahrenheit, so I can't tell for sure. And he asked me what it was, and I told him. He said, That was one of his favorite little things. What are his symptoms? So I told him, maybe I'll take a walk up and have a look at him. So he came up. You were lying on the couch.
Yeah, I remember that.
He had you get up and hop on one foot, because apparently that's a test for appendicitis. Okay. And he said, I think maybe you have appendicitis.
And then I remember him pushing down. I was having pain here. Yeah. He pushed down and let go. And it was okay. It hurt a little bit when he let go. And then he's like, Yeah. So he said, I'll call ahead. So he called ahead, and we brought you to the hospital. He called Dr. Michael Hirsch and said, I've got an appendicitis coming in. And I want to say this is December 20th, I think.
Yeah, it
wasn't
was
quite
around
Christmas
then.
yet, yeah.
I was planning on having the neighborhood ladies over for tea, for
The
Christmas
next day.
tea the next day. So we were sitting there in the surgical waiting room, and I was drawing a little plan of where I was going to put what food on the table when the neighborhood ladies came over. The doctor had told us ahead of time, it's
could be 45 minutes,
a quick
right?
surgery, and so we were sitting there, and finally someone came out and said, it's taking a little longer than we thought. The doctor will be out to talk to you. And then, it was hours later, he came out and told us that you had Crohn's disease, which we had never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Nowadays, you see a commercial every 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Most people have not only know someone.
We had to... they were going to put us in touch with the gastroenterologist.
The Bakers,
so,
is that?
Was that what their? Yeah, a husband and wife team. And you were going to be going into the ICU. And I said, okay.
What are you going to say? No, you
can't. Right? Yeah. So
sorry.
I know. So anyway, they did let us in to see you. That night, and you had tubes everywhere. You were out of it.
Yeah.
And then we came home, and then first thing the next morning,
I woke up. I think I woke up at some point early. Was that early morning, or when was Father? Was it Father Tom or
Father Tom Sullivan?
Yeah.
Came to see you, and you had.
I had a tube down my throat.
Yeah.
When he came.
Yeah, and I don't know if they had a feeding tube. I know you had IVs anyway. And they had adhesive taped your, was it a cross or something you were wearing? Rosary beads?
It was a saint medal.
Okay.
Saint medal at St. David.
And when you saw Father Tom, you grabbed it. And then from there you went to the step-down unit.
Yeah.
And then they started gradually reintroducing food, but you weren't home for Christmas.
It was New Year's Eve is when I came home.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Not, having a Christmas, but not without one of your kids there.
It was the worst Christmas we ever had. I said to Dad, I'm not cooking. I mean, we can't. So we went out to eat, and we took all your toys and all your presents in a bag and
to the hospital.
And brought them up to the hospital. And Dad still did. I don't think he did the movie of everyone coming down the stairs.
There was a movie. There was a movie
because they all wished you
we'll see you soon.
Christmas. Yeah, we'll see you soon.
But you could see when you watch that video of them opening their presents Christmas morning. It's obviously
very subdued.
Not the same.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And every time I get frantic about, I'm not going to get all this done and da 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 da. And
say, how many times, Mom, have we said everyone's healthy and that's
right.
all that matters?
That's all that matters.
And no matter any time something stressful comes up, if you say that to yourself,
and
we have to. Not a lot of people do that.
No,
they're so quick to complain about this and that and this and that.
Right?
Well, no, actually,
no.
If you're all healthy.
That's the best Christmas present ever. Yeah, and even now with COVID, we haven't had a normal Christmas really. So hopefully this year we will.
So we got through it, and I'll remember you guys coming to visit me, and we're still making jokes. We're still getting through it. We're still like, this is what it's going to be done, and we're glad the surgery went well. And I remember, I have this Crohn's disease thing, like I said before, but I'm going to be fine. Kat can live with disease, so can I.
Yep.
And it took me a long time to actually, I still don't 100% have my Crohn's under control, but it took me a long time to figure out how to live with chronic disease. But knowing I can, that's the first step.
Right. I will say that I couldn't have gotten through any of it without Dad.
Yeah.
Because, he's the rock.
Dad's the, this is how it is. We're going to do this. We're going to, you got to do A, B, and C. We're going to get through it no matter what.
Yep. And now I can say we've gotten through worse.
We have.
No matter what it is.
I asked, what was it like with a kid in your, kid not at home for Christmas, then 3 years later, you have a kid who had more,
with cancer.
This is with brain cancer, and again, I was the first person I knew who had cancer, which is weird for an 18-year-old to say, but like I've shared this story many times, it was in a way a good thing I had my Crohn's experience, because I was not telling doctors about my symptoms. I was just being Mr. Tough Guy and getting through it. But then when I had different symptoms when I was in high school, the double vision and headaches, I was like, this is not normal, something's wrong. I told you we got to go to the eye doctor right away. Neither of us thought at that point. I thought something was wrong with my contacts. We were not thinking, like, who would ever think cancerous brain tumor?
You wouldn't. Of course, now every time somebody gets a headache,
I don't. But that's why it's important to know. If I knew, I rarely got headaches, and they were never that bad. I knew something was wrong. And it's, I would say this many times. It's important to know what is normal for you, and if it's if you get out of that normal zone, then go get checked out. No matter what it is, you're gonna find out what it is. Earlier the better.
You were still driving the St. John's carpool, and at some point I said to you, "How could you drive?" And you said, "Well, I know if I saw 2 stop signs, I'd stop."
That was only a day or two.
Yeah, I know, but still, and in that case too, family. I mean, Auntie came over at the time. I had a couple of babysitting jobs. She came over and stayed with the little boy, so I could go to the hospital because that's when you were having the CAT scan,
right?
And it was just before her birthday.
So it was the 3rd. Isn't that her?
It's her birthday. Yep.
So I started having symptoms on Sunday night, I want to say. So that Friday is when the CAT scan. We went to the eye doctor, then an ophthalmologist, then Friday the ophthalmologist neurologist. And does the CAT, and I always share this moment. This is such an important part of the story. We were literally walking out of his office, and you said, "Should we call you if his headaches get worse?" And he looked at my chart like he didn't know I was having headaches. Like, how that? First of all, how is that possible? Secondly, thank God you said that, because when you said that, then he ordered the CAT scan.
He got on the phone and said, "I need a CAT scan stat."
That you're right.
Right.
So, which you rarely. A doctor orders a CAT scan, you got to come, but you got to make an appointment.
Right.
He said, "No, it's happening now." So I knew, not because of that, but I knew when they took a run round of pictures and then took a different round of pictures at a different angle. I knew I had enough experience knowing doctors don't do that unless there's something there. And so when that was happening, someone, was it the doctor or the technician who?
I don't even remember. I do remember when we were at that last appointment. Do you remember he spun that wheel in front of your eyes?
Like the optical illusion kind of thing?
And your eyes jumped, and he said to his resident, he's got dorsal midbrain syndrome. Yeah. And when he said that, not in front of you, but when Dad and I were in the elevator, I said, "It's something bad. I know."
Because he wouldn't say that if it wasn't.
Right. Yeah. That didn't sound like, "Oh, he'll get over it."
Right.
So,
they told you before they told me that there was a tumor.
Yes.
Because you told me they found a tumor.
And I saw the CAT scan, and it looked like a spider. That's all I could think of was like it was a spider. And at the time, they didn't know it was malignant. Right. Because people get non-malignant brain tumors.
Actually, they thought with the location, it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's when we were scheduled for the biopsy. But for some reason, they couldn't do the biopsy. We went and talked to the doctor.
We met with the surgeon who said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut in the back of your neck, go up and get a piece of it out."
Yeah.
And I signed my life away.
Right.
With the brain surgery. Like, anything can go wrong. And I share this sometimes that one of the things said, with all brain surgery, there's a slight chance the patient will undergo a severe personality change. And I showed that to you and Dad and was like, "You guys wish."
Hope for the best.
But that's what we did. You joke. You joke about when life throws you challenges and, like that, you still have to joke. You cannot lose your sense of humor no matter what.
And I mean, that got us through. That still gets me through every day. I mean, every day I say give thanks
Yeah.
because Dad makes me laugh every day, and sometimes not intentionally, but that gets you through. And they called with a scheduled appointment, and it was like a month before they were going to be able to do the biopsy.
Yeah.
So I called Erin Thomas to see if Bob was around, and she had him call me. She had him paged, and he called me, and I said, "Look, we can't wait this long for the biopsy. Can you do anything?" He said he's not going to need it. Excuse me. And I said, "Why?" And he said because his blood work is back.
Oh,
and
he told you?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the marker is there for cancer.
Oh, God.
So,
see, and that's to you hearing that must have been like unbelievable, like how
in a way, but I think
happen?
I knew.
Yeah. Me too. Like I was actually, it's so weird to say this, but I was glad. I was like, well, they know what it is. I don't care what name they call it.
Yeah.
Knowing what it is a good thing.
Right.
And to me, like, cancer was so like foreign to me. Just, I knew the word, obviously. I knew a lot of people like killed a lot of people, and I knew you lost your hair usually with treatment, but I didn't know why. Now I know why that works that way, because chemo goes after fast dividing cells, including hair cells. But then so Dr. Bob knew, and then Dr. Bob, I know you basically obviously probably started praying right away.
Naturally.
And having other people pray. Dr. Bob was the one that came into my room, basically saved my life with the Crohn's, ordering the surgery. Then he comes into my room, and I mentioned this when Joan was on the podcast too, but comes into my room and tells me about visualization. And that's kind of my version of prayer. Like, to me, prayer and positive thought are very similar things. You're opening yourself up to the outcome that you want. You're asking for where you call it God, the universe, the force, positive. You're opening yourself up to that, and and that's what he told me. He said, when you get your chemo, you close your eyes and you picture it doing the thing it's supposed to do. And hockey goalies use this all the time.
Right.
Visualize, they picture themselves making every save. And I say that all the time, but it's so important. Like, you're not always going to get the outcome you want, but picturing the outcome you want increases those chances. And like you said, praying that the outcome you want is going to happen. And not only that, I mean, how many people, there were people in England praying for me. There was people. You
were on the prayer list at Westminster Abbey. I mean, there were people all over Canada praying for you. All kinds of orders of nuns, the Sisters of St. Anne, from Anna Maria. My friend Pat had her sister, who's the Sister of St. Joseph. They were all on the prayer. And I do believe in the power of prayer.
Yeah, I mean, to me...
Graham, she was praying for you all the time. Grandpa's sister, Aunt May, who used to be a nun, I don't know how many. She wore out rosary beads praying for you. Well,
and speaking of the power of prayer and positive thought, when I was first diagnosed, they said you're going to need 4 to 5, 6 rounds of chemotherapy followed by radiation. Then after my chemo was done, they said, we don't know why, but you don't need radiation. And we knew. We kind of knew why. I knew why. You probably knew why.
They said you don't need radiation because the tumor is gone.
Yeah.
And if we did radiation, we'd be radiating healthy tissue, and we don't want to do that. And that, from the time you were diagnosed to that day, was, I think, the first time I cried in front of you.
Hearing that word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I knew that day was going to come. It was funny. One of my friends from BC was like, when I got that news, he's like, "Do you want to go out and celebrate?" I was like, "No, I knew it was coming. I'm good."
Yeah. So, that was everything in our family kind of changed
after that. I mean, that's what it gives you perspective, right?
Yep.
I mean, it shows you, the diabetes and Crohn's kind of introduce us to the concept of being healthy is really all that matters. But then
Right.
the brain cancer kind of drove it home for the rest of our
absolutely.
lives.
Yeah.
Like,
and also we realized that your life can go on.
Yeah.
And I mean, you, after the diagnosis, did everything you wanted to do. You went to your senior prom. You went to the Westboro senior prom.
went to the Red Sox game.
Went to the Red Sox with an ace bandage wrapped around your hep line. You
watched Spinal Tap 50 times that summer, which you probably could quote it by the end of the summer.
Spinal Tap. Wayne's World was the one I remember. Oh, my God. But I actually still think it's funny.
I kept laughing no matter what.
Yeah. And that kind of, we haven't talked about the Beatles yet.
Oh, yes.
But, every time you were on your way for an admission for your cancer, as you know, we played your mixtape, but Let It Be was the one, and that's the song I still can't listen to without crying, because that reminds me so much, and that was the philosophy. Just let it be.
Do you remember the first time you listened to the Beatles?
I was a junior in high school, and my friend Christine and I always believed that God sent the Beatles to get us over JFK's assassination.
Because they happened. Because I mean, when did they? Because that's what year was that?
November of '63 was the assassination.
And their first album was in the 60s. I mean, most of their albums were in the 60s.
Yeah. And I mean, going to a Catholic high school, being Catholic, JFK was like our president.
Yeah.
And when he was assassinated, you can't even imagine the effect it had on our school, and it was just unbelievable. So
music is healing.
It is. Yeah. And the Beatles were just, I had Beatles sneakers. And I wish I still had them. I had every one of the 100 Beatle trading cards.
Oh my God.
On the door of my closet. And they're gone.
See, I wish I had a picture of that.
Yeah. Oh, me too.
I'm sure mentally you do.
Yep. I had a Ringo bobblehead. And they were a breath of fresh air. I was never into like Elvis or I did like a singer called Fabian in the 50s. And also Pat Boone was big, then. But I mean, the Beatles were everything.
So, and then everything. Tell me about the time you heard they were going to be playing.
I heard that they were going to be in Boston. And WBZ at the time was like the rock station. Yeah. And they had a contest that you had to send in a postcard and you could win tickets. So I thought, well, if I win the tickets, there's no way they can not let me go. So I got 100 postcards, and I put my name on 99 of them, and I put Auntie's on one. And I was so afraid that she was going to win. But I think it was for 2 tickets, hopefully she would take me. Needless to say, I didn't win, and they would not let me go to any Beatles concert. Ever. I finally saw Paul McCartney when I was in my 60s.
You're welcome.
And and he was a little older than I was. And I just on a side note, if you're listening to this, I'm so glad you stopped dyeing your hair. But the Beatles were it. Christine and I used to go. She lived within walking distance of our high school. And so sometimes after school, I'd walk over to her house, and then I'd get picked up after supper. And we used to go up into her bedroom, and they had the top 5 songs at a certain time on, what radio station was it? I don't even remember. The Worcester rock radio station. And we would be so mad because they'd do them in reverse order. So they'd end with the number 1 song. And because we loved the Beatles so much, we hated the Rolling Stones. We hated
Wow.
the Dave Clark Five because they
cut into the playing time.
Would bump the Beatles out of number one spot. And we'd be listening with bated breath with our bag of potato chips and our bottles of Coke for the number one song. And we could tell by the first chord what it was. Yeah. And if it was like a Dave Clark 5 song, boom, the radio went off right away.
And now you can just say, Alexa, play the Beatles' greatest hits.
Yeah, exactly. And that takes a long time. So, the Beatles, and because of how much I loved the Beatles, I mean, you kids have all appreciated the Beatles.
And you have a lovely singing voice, too, Mom. This is another fact.
Oh, well, don't ask me to sing.
Well, no. I'm just saying that
Thank you.
You love the Beatles and you had a good singing voice. That kind of probably instilled in us more an appreciation of, if you loved the Beatles and your voice was horrible, we probably would know.
And, I mean, we have to talk about Dad playing the piano. I mean, we've had a lot of music in the house all the time. Yeah. And you know, you kids have all grown up around that. Yeah. So that was good. Music and books.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you've ever seen me without a book.
And craving books, craving knowledge, craving education.
Yep.
You instilled all that.
All our trips to the library and sometimes dragging you up off the floor if you didn't want to leave the library. Different things like that.
Well, Mom, we're over an hour now, so we're going to have to get...
Okay.
So some of these stories at a later date, I hope you'll return as a guest.
Well, it depends. By popular demand.
Yeah, I think it's going to go viral. I mean, Paul McCartney's going to retweet it. And the WTAG is going to get that footage of you singing.
That's true. Well, no. Oh, yes, that's right. The Atwood Hall St. Patrick's Day concert.
But thank you so much for setting the bar so high for women in my life who inspire me, Mom. You're the best. You're awesome. I wouldn't be who I am without you.
I don't know. Is that a good thing?
The positive stuff.
Good. Okay.
I always tell the people, the positive stuff about me I get from Mom and Dad. All the other stuff is my own doing.
Your own doing.
I love you, Mom. Thank you so much.
I love you too, Dave.
Okay.
You know.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.